Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and after a summer of letting Nigel Farage spread more disinformation about Asylum, Labour have made a statement in Parliament about a raft of new measures designed to tackle the problems. But what exactly are the problems, politically speaking, and do Labour's moves really show that they understand? But first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button to stay notified. So Gavin Stevens, chair of the National Police Chiefs Council, has spoken out about the way politicians are stoking community tensions when they should be seeking to calm and diffuse them. His pleas for responsible behaviour will fall on deaf ears, of course. The entirety of Reform UK, as well as a critical mass within the Conservative Party, are incentivised to stoking these tensions much further. Labour give off the strong impression they feel powerless to calm things down themselves, possibly correctly because they're not exactly trusted, particularly amongst the section of the community who are exhibiting these signs of tension. So you end up with very garbled messaging. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper was yesterday urging compassion for genuine asylum seekers in Parliament and emphasising the fact that immigration is a big part of Britain's history and culture. But the social media messaging is all about the warnings that people who should not be in the country will be dealt with severely. Mind you, given that Labour have failed at communicating with the public on all issues, it should come as no surprise that they would be failing on an issue which the powerful, well-funded and organised private media environment is keen to use for destructive ends. So Labour are not even competing in the information war, so are they at least dealing with the problems with practical solutions? Well, let's be clear about what the problems are here, from, again, political point of view. First, that asylum seekers are being housed in hotels. Now, although nobody really thinks this is a suitable way to house asylum seekers, nonetheless, it should not be a major source of community tension either. But it is, so it needs to end. Second, that although many people want to help genuine refugees, they have been persuaded that those coming across on small boats cannot be genuine refugees because they're breaking the law to get here. Well, why not just claim asylum legally if you've got a good claim, right? Because there is no legal process to do so. But the public are not being told that, and the government are not going to tell them, because then they'd be asked, well, why not then? And for reasons that I think are mad, Labour don't want to create the legal process which would end the small boat crossings almost immediately. So these are the problems. If at the next election there are asylum seekers in hotels and large numbers of people arriving by small boat and not being sent back, then the voters who prioritise asylum for their vote will not vote Labour. This is why I've said that Labour really shouldn't be expending as much bandwidth on the issue. Their policies are falling flat. Even when people approve of them, they won't accept them as good enough unless it solves the problems. Reform UK claim they will solve the problems completely, but they're not in power, so they don't have to deliver. Labour in power, they have to deliver. Labour cannot compete with that without actually delivering. So what have they announced and will it work? Well, the first is to temporarily suspend refugee family reunion applications. That would mean that anyone whose asylum claim is approved cannot then bring their family over unless they meet the usual requirements in terms of like minimum joint incomes. The thinking behind this is likely to be twofold. Firstly, that it just reduces the number of low to zero income refugees the government has to find housing for. Second, that it might dissuade some asylum seekers from coming to Britain altogether if there is no safe way to let their families follow afterwards. One of the big political problems with the small boat crossings is the far right claim, it's all fighting age men. Why is it always men if they're genuine refugees? Whole families would flee, wouldn't they? Persecution and war and things like that. Why aren't there women? And the answer is, of course, there are whole families fleeing war, persecution and climate destruction, but the men risk their lives to make the claim in the hope that their families can then come afterwards via a safe route. So the thinking behind this policy is likely to dissuade those men from making the crossing because they'd need to be earning at least £29,000 a year to safely bring their families over. Will it work? Well, it's hard to see how it will stop the small boat crossings. Let's say it does have some impact on reducing the number. Is that good enough for those voters? No. Remember, Farage is promising a zero-in policy. If Labour do not match that, they lose the contest. Labour would do better shouting about their economic policies in order to encourage voters to prioritise their own personal living standards over their desire for others to be treated cruelly. And this policy can go badly wrong as well. Like, what if, instead of dissuading the men from coming over because they won't be able to bring their families, what if families start to make the crossing, it won't just be headlines about refugees drowning in the Channel every now and then, but children. Next policy is to reduce the time given to move out of temporary housing after being granted asylum. So here's how it works. So you claim asylum in the UK and it's like, okay, yeah, here's your asylum claim. Go and find yourself somewhere to live. I don't have anywhere to live. So you're homeless. Now you can apply for housing, which after a process may be granted, hence so many being put up in hotels, because we haven't been building houses for years. So then your asylum claim is granted. Great stuff, smashing, right. You're now officially a refugee, you can work and all the rest of it. Only because you're no longer an asylum seeker, you don't get to carry on your asylum seeker accommodation. You have to move out. You're basically homeless again. But you get 56 days to find somewhere more permanent. So you've got time to get a job and get your sort of first paycheck and then, try and find something. Okay. But Cooper is now reducing that time to just 28 days in order to accelerate the rate of reduction of hotel places for asylum seekers. She's even suggested replacing the hotels with modular buildings on industrial sites or ex-military sites. Now, this idea seems to be quite new as there weren't any details, so it's clearly not something we've been working on for a while. So will that work? Well, the Tories tried to use ex-military sites to house asylum seekers before, including one near me, and the Gammons came out and complained about a dog's grave, and that was that. So if this idea is to work, I'm guessing the government will need to find somewhere which isn't a gammon magnet. There are communities who would accept this, of course, but is there a crossover between where suitable facilities exist and those communities? But if they can do this in the next couple of years, it does remove the hotel problem. The cost would be way less. And if they're in communities who won't mind, the community tension should evaporate as well. Another advantage is that Farage won't be able to switch from complaining about asylum seekers in hotels to complaining about asylum seekers in houses that British people need, right? He will still complain about the cost, mind you, even though that will be much reduced. But as long as the accommodation is fit for human habitation and they can locate them in communities who will, even if not be welcoming, at least shrug their shoulders, this is one measure which may offer a practical solution to one of the problems. The next change is to no longer use judges to consider appeals, but a panel of laymen who will get training. It's a bit like magistrates. The purpose of this, of course, is to massively speed up the appeals process. There are only so many judges. The government wants people to either be refugees or deported. It's the asylum claim process which is gumming up the works and causing the political problems. And they want to clear that Tory backlog quickly. However, an obvious criticism here is that the process may not be as robust. Former Tory Home Secretary Amber Rudd, who was herself very much involved in Windrush injustices, has come out to warn that Cooper could risk another Windrush level scandal if she acts in too much haste. So if this works, it will clear the backlog more quickly, meaning that the accommodation costs will fall more quickly as well. Remember, the political issue here is asylum seekers. It's not people being deported, of course, because they're being deported. Everyone's happy about that. Not the people being deported necessarily. Or they're refugees, in which case they're just migrants, right? In which case some people are unhappy about that, but most people are fine. It's just the asylum seeker designation that is the problem, right? But there is a risk of storing up a future scandal if they get it wrong, if they act in too much haste. Finally, the policy of warning foreign students that they cannot overstay their visas. Now, it's already the case that foreign students cannot overstay their, or indeed anyone with a visa of any kind cannot overstay it. The purpose of this policy is to avoid letting them have any sort of grace period. It's to basically say, as soon as your visa ends, we want you out of this country right now. And that is because they don't want to give them time to claim asylum, right? Because some students do. So the government are obsessed with making it as difficult as possible to claim asylum in order to reduce the numbers they have to deal with. So taken with the asylum policies Labour already had, what I'd say is, first, I'm assuming all this is legal, by the way. Obviously, people have strong feelings on both sides about the best way to deal with asylum morally, and I've got my own views. But ultimately, are these policies legal? The government have shown no signs of wanting to break international or domestic laws, and we're not seeing any real excitement about legal challenges to the moves, so I'm guessing they're legal. Will they work, though? Labour insists there will be no asylum seekers in hotels come the next election. Cooper's announcements yesterday made this claim more plausible, but they will not stop the boats, nor even reduce them down to numbers which won't generate a fuss. Labour could halve the number of crossings, and that will not be good enough for the voters who will prioritise the issue. And I see no reason why we should even suppose the numbers would halve. So my general view of the overall policy area remains the same. There are anti-asylum voters who will vote for that issue above all others. Labour have permanently lost them if they refuse to set up a safe route for the people that are otherwise making the channel crossings. There are anti-asylum people who link their views on asylum with poor access to housing, doctors, other public services, as well as maybe jobs. So in other words, they're thinking about their own circumstances. Labour can win these people over on other issues. So they should stop wasting their time talking about asylum, start talking about workers' rights, renters' rights, better housing, cleaner, cheaper energy, taking on corrupt water companies, boosting low incomes, not giving money to the Taliban, unlike Nigel Farage. That may also appeal to many of the pro-asylum voters out there as well. Why are Labour making this so difficult? Asylum is not an issue they can win the debate on. They're not winning any debates right now, but asylum is one they have no chance. Like, even if I reckon I could improve their communications, right? Okay, I might be a bit arrogant about that. I think I couldn't do any worse. If they were to say to me, Phil, we want you to come up with a really good debate that wins the asylum debate for us, I couldn't do it. I'd have to say to them, I cannot do that. I can do it on lots of other issues. I cannot do it on that. You cannot outbid Nigel Farage. So shift the debate to policy areas that Labour are strong on. It's really not hard. But let me know what you think in the comments below. And for more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later.